Frances Reaves, Parent Your Parents, and
Michael Miller with Community News.
And this is called Redux because we did this just not even an hour ago.
Back for another journey.
And what happened was no one could hear Michael, which I thought was fine. But no one else did. Yeah, I talked and talked and talked. It worked out really well. So, Michael, how are you?
Good. It seems like just yesterday. By the way, in this studio last week, Lori Jennings was here.
That was such a great interview, wasn't it?
It was. It was really, as I said before, it was getting a little bit more comfortable with talking about uncomfortable things, and talked about the death of a loved one. In this case, your father and her father.
Right, and she really went into it. Truthfully, I didn't even have to interview her. She's such a pro, and what a lovely, lovely lady. And, we know Lori Jennings from being an anchor person and being a part of the Miami community for almost, I think, over 20 years. And yet, when she talked about the death of her father and how, and in her, it was such an intimate discourse, just what happened to her. A couple of things that stand out for me is they were all in hospice together. First of all, she described her dad as a mountain man. And then she talked about how he never wanted to put anyone out. He didn't want to be a burden, which of course reminded me of both my parents. Neither one wanted to be a burden, which I don't understand. They're my parents. Of course they can be a burden. But she talked about being in hospice with him and going outside just to take a breath of air. And she saw a mama deer and a fawn. And she goes back inside, and it turns out the deer in Indian speak in New Hampshire mean angels. And a little bit later when she went out, there was a porcupine. And a porcupine is what protects you in death. And so it was almost, as she said, as happy a death as it could be. I mean, when you lose a loved one, it doesn't matter if you've said your goodbyes, if you've already cried your eyes out. There's just a vacant spot. It's a vacant spot, and you only know it when you've had that happen. And what you can't believe is how hard it is to lose a parent. That was my takeaway. How did you feel about losing?
Well, let's talk about you're writing a book called The 2-Minute Warning, and I think that's important in the context of this conversation. 2-minute warning, like at the football game or basketball, it's scores tied up, 100, basketball. Okay, you got 120 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you wrote this book, because you've been involved in senior cases, and you're also a lawyer, and Parent Your Parents, it sort of makes us start thinking about our life and about how much time we have on there.
It's true. And, Lori talked to that too. I mean, at the end of the interview, she discussed live every moment. And that's exactly what the 2-minute warning is about. And the last chapter, I only know this, of course, because I finished the book. The last chapter, no surprise, is about death. And death is one of those things that we can intellectually wrap our head around, but I think it's really difficult to emotionally put ourselves there. How will I be? Will I be all curled up? I mean, I've seen very few people actually die, but I've seen them close to death, and some are standing up. Some are sitting up. Some are lying down. Some are in a fetal position. My mother she knew something was happening, but she couldn't talk anymore. She'd had a stroke, and her little eyes were darting everywhere. And I found with Mom, I became her 7-year-old again, doing things like putting lotion on her body and making sure her hair was brushed and her face was moisturized. It was, I remember very clearly just doing acts that Mother would have loved for me to do as a child, which, of course, when you're a kid, you never do.
So when that time comes and you watch people as they die, as so many of our first responders have watched and the nurses.
Oh.
They've seen more people die. Sometimes I hear it, seen more in 2 or 3 months they had their entire career.
Right.
And so when you look at it, what a terrible way to go alone, all right?
Alone.
And with a breathing problem, all right? And to where you just stop.
That's what happens.
Yes.
They take the air away. They just take the air away to see if you can breathe on your own. And if you can't, that means that you've already said, I don't want to be able to live if I can't breathe on my own.
When I was in school, I was studying, I was in the health arena, and I said, okay, I was in the hospital, I saw somebody die, then I watched them do the autopsy, then I went to the funeral, all right, and watched that whole process. It really sort of put it in perspective to me about what happens to the physical body.
Right.
Certainly there's a lot more than that, but we miss that person when they're there. And when I was asking an old friend of mine who was running a funeral home, not the one I mentioned earlier, he says, Michael, funerals are for the living.
Right.
And you have to decide what you want to do for you, not for them, but for you. What's good for you? And anyway, let's get on to another subject.
well, you know, that goes to exactly what Lori discussed with her father. He didn't want, my cousin who just died also, he didn't want a big production. And I thought to myself, well, it really isn't about what you want. I mean, I didn't say that to Lori, of course, because she followed her father's wishes. But it really isn't about what you want. It's what you, the survivor, needs for closure. And I think it was really tough to have those Zoom ceremonies. I mean, I would have rather waited.
So there's some folks, oh, the Zoom is wonderful, but you know, some of the schools are saying, no, we're not doing the Zoom stuff anymore. You need to live on campus. You need to do this. You need to have socialization. You need to be here. You're going to have a higher rate of graduation. You're going to be more successful. You're going to meet people, and you're going to want to come back versus sitting at home and trying to do that.
Well, you can see with back to school, the 23rd, I think, is when most people are going back to school here in Miami. And you can see the kids are excited, like, okay, summer's over and we want to see each other. I mean, a lot of the schools have football practice now. And you know, if you're vaccinated, I think it's all good. All the football teams, all the high school football teams, if the kids are old enough, they're demanding that they have coronavirus, because if one person goes out, they might have to forfeit the game because everybody's on lockdown. And the NFL, I think, didn't I hear that the NFL did that for their players as well?
And right now, this is August 2021.
August 12th, I think.
August 12th, and the coronavirus is running rampant, and we both had our shots. And I'm not sure when it's going to get better, but it will.
It will.
And then at some point, we're going to go back to where we were celebrating in June, all right? And then we'll be back to some normalcy, whatever that is, hopefully within maybe a couple, 3 months or 4 months.
Well, I rarely take stands, but I'm a little like Jennifer Aniston on this. She's been criticized because she has let some people out of her inner circle because they don't want to get vaccinated. They have an issue with vaccination, all of which is fine, but please don't be near me. I mean, that's kind of how she is. I'm vaccinated. I want people around me to be vaccinated. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that. I'm on our condo board, and we just mandated that all our employees have vaccines, which meant that several of them, to come back to work, have to have vaccines.
And some non-vaccinated people, I suspect some of them are waiting for some person of authority to say, you need to go do that.
Right.
Whatever your beliefs are, if you want to keep doing this, these are our rules, you need to do that, all right? Because that will push a lot of people.
I think so.
And,
yeah.
Oh, by the way, I do want to congratulate the Miami-Dade County School Board and Broward County School Board, who said, listen, Governor, if you want to take away our salaries, that's okay. We're going to do the right thing.
Exactly. Right. Those kids who can't get vaccinated in our condo, because, you know, we're sort of like a little anthill with our condos and hallways and all this. We have about 100 kids between the ages of 0 and 12. And until you're 2, they don't even discuss vaccination. But between the 2 and 12-year-olds, so we're not mandating masks, but we are strongly suggesting, and by all the elevators, we have these signs. And it's not to protect me. It's to protect these little ones. I mean, they are our future.
So speaking of elevators, so I was in an elevator the other day. Please stand 6 feet apart. And I'm looking.
I know. And it's a 4-foot elevator.
It was actually pretty funny. I'm sure one day when we're going to have the comical routine.
I know.
Please social
6 feet apart. It is funny.
So let's talk about why you decided to write your book, 2-Minute Warning.
Well, because I don't think elders are represented in our culture at all. I mean, the good news about COVID is it has just shone, is that right? Shone a spotlight on our elders and how they are placed in these rooms with people they have never met before in their lives and expected to just exist there with minimal stimulation.
So 15 years ago, my father winds up in a nursing home. He's up in the middle of the state. So I get a phone call from the nursing home. I didn't put him in there. His girlfriend did.
Oh.
And so he's hitting people when they go into the room, a roommate.
Right.
And I said, oh, he does that all the time. You have to pick him up. No, you need to get a court order to remove him. All right. All right. So get your court order. All right. And then get his girlfriend to pick him up. All right. I said, if you want to send him to me, that's okay. I said, but I'm not taking him out unless you get a court order. Because he was so adamant about that he wanted to be in this space with the people that he wanted, which could have been alone or could have been with somebody else. So there are a lot of people like that get subjected to long-term roommates, all right?
Yeah.
And that's tough, especially as hospitals are providing more and more private rooms, all right? So you're sick there and you're in the hospital for a day, a week, and then all of a sudden, if you're elderly and you can't move around, you wind up going to this, I have a new roommate.
Yes. No.
Like summer camp.
Right. Well, I will say that Mount Sinai just built a new tower. I don't know if you've been to it,
No.
but it's very much everybody gets their place. So, which I was really happy to see. But in a nursing home, in fact, I'm dealing with a client right now. In a nursing home, you're given the option of a single room or a room in which you share. And really, most of the people who share rooms are folks with dementia, because I know mom shared a room. And even when you share a room, you're looking at anywhere from $9,000 to $11,000 a month. So that's more than an assisted living center, which is anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 a month. So,
did you say $9,000 to $11,000 a month
for a nursing home?
No.
In which you share, Mike is speechless, everyone, $9,000 to $11,000 a month. And my particular client is from Venezuela. She just happened to be here in the United States when she got sick. So she has no Medicare or Medicaid protection. Everything is private pay. And the nursing home won't let her in until they are shown that she can privately pay. And we have to put up double-digit numbers before she can move in. Yeah, because they want to be paid.
And they don't want to have to evict somebody. Is that the word?
Evict. They don't use that in the nursing home.
So if somebody gets in a nursing home on private pay, and then all of a sudden there's no money, how does a nursing home take care of that?
I don't know. I remember when this happened to Mother, her long-term care people started just quit paying all of a sudden. And the owner, we had her in a private facility, and the owner of the private facility, I'll never forget this. She said to me, "I'm a Christian woman, and I could never throw your mother out. But we're going to have to find a way to get her out." In other words, that was her way of saying, she's taking up a bed, a $5,000 a month bed, and I can't afford that. But, she gave us a week, which was a really good lesson to me, so that when I have to worry about what's if someone can afford me or not. I also know, well, hey, when we were in between a rock and a hard place, we didn't have to worry about that.
Okay. Can we move over to homeowners associations in light of Surfside
Oh my gosh,
event there,
Surfside.
where unfortunately, several hundred people,
98 people died.
and their families, and and the
Oh,
tragedy
I mean,
there.
the tragedy was much bigger than the 98.
Yes. And then when you look at it, the people that were in the other tower, even though they didn't die,
Lost their home.
right, whatever they had was gone. They weren't allowed back in, right?
I know.
And it's like all of a sudden.
No, they gave them like 3 or 4 hours. There was this amount of time. But what can you really take in 3 or 4 hours? Your photos? Your jewelry?
Right, that's about it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been on a board,
Right.
a homeowner association, you need to do that before, right? Just to see how that works,
Yeah.
and how it doesn't work. Right? These are private. The condominium association is owned by the members, which are the owners there. They're responsible for everything that goes on there.
Right.
So you have your neighbor, all right, in the building, deciding on the activities that are going on there, and what repairs need to be made and when. Right.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it had been going on for several years.
Several years.
But there are lots of condo associations to where the board members say, I can't vote for a raise. I mean, on this, because I know my my neighbor can't afford the $100 a month or the $200 a month for the special assessment. Though it's a really bad situation, because there's no governing body that's really effective. And I was on a board, and you know what? I asked the people that were running it, are we in violation of state law? Yes. Okay, board members, what are we going to do? Nothing. Nothing.
They can't not do nothing without the
But somebody,
lawsuit.
yeah. So the question is, what is the agency that is going to try to force it? We see in Aventura, they passed a new ordinance up there that they want to see every engineering report that is on any of those. All right, when you have it done, they want a copy of it. I think it was 24 or 48 hours.
Wow.
So there could be an adult in the room. All right, and in this case, on Surfside, I think it was between $80,000 and $150,000 special assessment.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, it was a huge special assessment. I think closer to 150,000. But I also know within Key Biscayne, we have a building there, a luxury high rise that when the 42 year came around, they were so bad that they've had to, ask for an extension, and that was 2 years ago. It's like, okay, what happened here? And what they did, instead of getting an assessment, which is what my building did, they went and borrowed from a bank, which I'm like, I don't know, you're paying extra for that money. You can let your residents borrow from you, really, but it's financial mismanagement. That's the reason that they weren't ready. I mean, that's the reason they fell down. No one wanted to raise them. And if you just raise it in smaller increments, it's not such a big deal. And in one particular building, we have some folks who are on the edge, and I get it, but the building's still got to go,
So there are going to be a lot of buildings coming up in the next 5 years. It's going to cost a lot of money to fix them. And I guess the question is, once the engineer report comes back and they don't fix it within a certain time frame, who's the adult in the room that's going to say, hey, you can't keep delaying this? Is there an entity that's going to do that?
Well, it's supposed to be the village public works or the city public works. I mean, you have to do it.
That's because the city is the one, or if it's in the county, they're the ones say you need this 40-year inspection. You're supposed to have it back in 90 days. And unfortunately for the county, there were several buildings, including the courthouse, that they forgot to do.
Can you believe that?
With all that conversation going on for years.
Lawyers and judges live in that place. And did you know that Florida is one of the few states in the South, well, Florida as a state, but I think it's South Florida, Dayton Broward. Wasn't it you who told me, Michael, that this is the area? I mean, we're one of the few places in the USA that has the 40-year on
Oh, in the
high-rise.
state, yeah, there are very few places that have that. And it's a fellow that was in the real estate business. It was a little too soon to bring it up, but he brought it up. He said, "Michael, how many non-events have there been where buildings have fallen down? Non-events, not
Yeah.
hurricanes, bombs, and stuff like
Right.
that. That's not to detract from what happened, all right? But it's very few.
Yeah.
That's why these other places, all right, haven't done that, all right?
Right.
And sometimes it can cost a lot of money. The real question is, what entity is going to enforce this, the completion of the 40-year inspection and that the work gets done,
Right.
all right? And if there isn't enough money in the homeowners, they go, hey, I'm not paying it, and there isn't enough, who's going to come along and go, well, if you're not going to repair it, we're going to condemn the building.
Right. Which
Right?
is what you have to do.
And I see the counties and a couple of cities have told a couple of residents in these big buildings, you have to leave, right?
Mhm.
And I understand they're doing that in an abundance of caution,
Right.
right? Because the guy that was on the line, he doesn't want to be responsible. I
Well,
told
they
the,
fired the one guy. Remember, they fired the one guy from Surfside.
yeah,
So everybody else now is the CYA thing, right? We're covering your ass. I mean, excuse my mouth there, but it drives me nuts. It's always a CYA thing. And especially in a bureaucracy, no one's willing to take a chance. No one's willing to say, well, let's just shut it down because, oh my gosh, you might lose some votes. I mean, let's be true.
okay. And speaking of being true, I look at all those first responders that were there at that building, all right?
Mhm.
Besides the COVID, but being, in the hospitals, but being there, on how they handle that, looking for all these dead people and the grief and everything was, all the pieces of concrete and other things that they handled. All right. There's a rabbi that I know that was there every day. He was one of the chaplains for the police.
Yeah,
all right?
he was on TV.
Yes.
Right.
And I said, so what are you doing to process this? And he had that look, all right, of looking back for the past 30 days about all that trauma and all the grief and all the people that he was with. And you can see that he was impacted significantly by that. And I think of the police and the firemen that are down there, it got cleaned up. Okay, I'm going to go home and I'll just, like it was no big deal, right? Those are some superheroes that were down there.
Yeah.
And
well, also, and I know we have our issues with the press, but the press, I mean, the people who covered it for us, they also had to see what was going on there. They didn't necessarily see the person before they went in the body bag, but nevertheless, they saw the body bag. And I don't know, I mean, there are a lot of reporters who cover disasters. For whatever reason, they can do it better. It doesn't affect them as much. But I think something like that, I call it the bridge over River Kwai syndrome. That bridge was going to blow. The question is, who is going to be on it? And that's exactly what happened to that condominium. That condominium was going to fall down, and it wasn't going to crumble down. It was just going to pancake down.
13 seconds.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
And I guess if there was any good news out of that, is that hopefully that most of the people died immediately.
Yeah.
Rather than being in there and suffering.
Hopefully. Yeah.
And so now there's this big lot that's down there. The government.
Have you gone?
No. The governments are saying it's unlikely that they're going to buy it and turn it into a park. There's some offers on that as.
Of course, it's beachfront property.
Right. And so it should be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. And maybe the bankruptcy court's going to say, hey, we're going to take that $120 million and we're going to distribute it to the victims in this and to their families.
That's what should happen.
Yes.
It was their land.
And there are dozens of contractors on that job. All right. That just insurance companies open your wallet because they're coming for it.
Yeah.
But I'm pleased that the process there is going along quickly, right? And when you think about it, it is, they've already identified everybody. They have all the reports. The Herald did a great job in covering that. They
I
showed the
thought so,
pictures,
too.
right, of the columns and the way it was supposed to be built and the way it wasn't, and the pictures that were there before it went down. So it's a great lesson, for all of us to make sure that we're doing the right thing and make sure you hire some good engineers, right?
Yeah, for sure. Those engineers. It's a little like 9/11. I mean, there has been some controversy over how those buildings were built because of the way they fell down, and no one could. I mean, because the fire heated those columns, and the columns couldn't take the heat, and the entire building just sort of it didn't really melt, but kinda fell and melted. I mean, that whole engineering thing. I've In Chicago, if you go to Chicago, those floors are 60, 65, 70 stories high. I'm like, okay, things I'm not going to be buying now. The penthouse in 70 stories.
So in this room, 9/11, and we had a TV here, and I was watching
Oh, wow.
watching it happen. And on the third one, which I don't know if that was the Pentagon or the field.
The Pentagon.
I said, maybe this is it for us. I thought for a moment, I said, maybe this is it. They're coming, all right, whoever they are, all right?
Right.
And you realize how many thousands, 3,100, 3,200 people. Yeah. And 20 years later, they're still suffering from some side effects of taking care of that. And certainly one of my prouder moments when it was George Bush. I didn't vote for him, but he was standing on top of the pile, I think, with the mayor or governor back then. And
or both.
And it was a proud moment of unity.
Right. He was a good president in that moment. I hadn't voted for him either. But he got us involved in this 20-year war that we're now fighting about getting out of. But you know what's interesting about George Bush, and I know we're totally changing the subject. I think it's so interesting how he is now doing art, and he paints wounded warriors.
Wow.
I can't help but think that there's a little guilt. This man is wounded because I sent him into battle, and we have a whole lot more wounded warriors because medicine's so good now.
So let's talk about wounded warriors. So you have all the first responders. Mm-hmm. They're wounded, all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We know that. We know that the nurses and the doctors, the respiratory therapists, the people who work in the hospital, the administrators, everybody's kids are working, all that, because that whole conversation is going on about COVID and about how to handle it. Now, unfortunately, about half the nurses haven't taken the COVID shot, which baffles me, but it is what it is, and hopefully they'll get to this next point.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things, the uncomfortable things, is that for every COVID patient that goes in, all right, that's one less bed for somebody that really needs surgery, but can't get in because somebody is there for COVID and that did take the shots.
Right.
We had a local hospital in here last 2 weeks ago. They said, we have to serve the public, not just the COVID, but what about these people that need surgery, that need cancer surgery, that's not an emergency, but they need it, right? So if we say no more surgery, how do you do that, right?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, my hat's off to my periodontist, my dentist, who all day long are like, write this on people. I
know.
It's really an incredible time. We have a storm coming this weekend. What's the latest on it?
I think Fred's going to bypass us.
We got lucky again.
Yeah, we got lucky again. I think Fred's going to bypass us, and we're just going to get a lot of rain, which we need, so that's not so bad. But that was a lot. I mean, these things, all they have to do is make a right or a left. Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so let's talk about Key Biscayne. I know there was a case over there where there was a lawsuit brought against the city on the $100 million bond. All right.
Then the community. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. $100 million bond. There's a lawsuit that said it wasn't specific enough. The ordinance wasn't specific enough, but people voted for it anyway, which is an open checkbook. Whatever. We went and we're borrowing the money, and the commission will figure out how to spend it.
Right.
But the judge said that it was okay.
Right. All right. Judge said it was okay. It's a little bit tighter than that. When they have $100 million sort of sitting in the bank, and then as each project comes up, the citizenry has to vote on it, like undergrounding wires, sewage. Well, I mean, sewage versus septic has already been taken care of.
You're talking about power lines underneath.
Yeah, power lines underneath.
Well, speaking of big construction, it looks like it's going to be between $1 and $4 trillion. It's going to be buying stuff. That's going to be buying stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
We like that when people get to go to work.
Right. Infrastructure, as we discussed earlier, Michael, that's how we got back to work after the Great Depression, is President Roosevelt just put together a lot of infrastructure projects. And it's not until you don't have work that you realize how important it is to work. I mean, there's a reason we should go get dollars. You feel good about yourself. It's true. I feel better about myself when I wash a car than take a case, because cases take forever and ever. And a car you can wash in a half hour. But there's a sense of accomplishment when you build a road, you build a bridge, you build a sewer system. And I have a good friend who's an architect up in Broward County, and he looks at his house that he designed, and there it is. And he looks at these different buildings that he's designed and worked with engineers. And I mean, it's a sense of accomplishment. And I think that's the great thing about infrastructure, is you can see what you're doing.
And my guess is with a year or less, we will start seeing signs of that out on our streets here. And I hope we get money for taking care of Biscayne Bay, or flooding, maybe some more for transportation. We have a few bridges.
We want Rickenbacker Causeway, Key Biscayne.
What did I hear about Rickenbacker Causeway?
Well, underneath, it's not doing so well at all. And first of all, this whole bridge thing is so amazingly complicated, because there's under the bridge, there's the side of the bridge, and what Dade County has been doing, because Key Biscayne doesn't own the bridges, but what Dade County has been doing is shoring things up, when in fact what needs to be done, it's what we all do, is we kick the road down the kick the bucket down the road.
You could do
the road down the bucket. Who cares? And but now they're trying to do a PPP, a private-public partnership.
To sell the bridge.
Yeah, which means high tolls. And here's the other thing. It doesn't matter what you do, someone's going to complain. It's sort of like the bond. And then we've had a faction in Key Biscayne who was on top of our community fund, and now the community fund has just said we're not going to work with the village anymore, and the village would use a community fund to fund things before they could get their bureaucracy in order to get it done, but it can't be done anymore. I mean, and the harassment, and now we have lawsuits for libel and defamation. Oh yeah, these lawsuits aren't from.
Was that from the election?
No. This is all new. It all stems from the bond. The group who didn't want the bond is now saying, you're using funds for a party, or you're using funds. Well, the truth of the matter is, when our chief of police resigned, the community fund headed up putting the party together. I mean, he'd been there 18 years. People usually do have a party. And
that was a problem?
Well, they said they used resident taxpayer money. No, they didn't. The community foundation, whatever the village told them to do is what they did. They didn't use, the village paid them back for everything. If you want to know who funded that party, you go to the mayor and the manager. You don't go to the foundation. They're just doing what they're asked to do because they can do it quickly. They don't have all this bureaucracy, all these forms. And I'm chair of the Key Biscayne Car Week, which is headed up by Emerson Fittipaldi. And
when is that coming up?
November 12th and 13th.
Is that when we're going to see all the sports cars all over town?
Well, we're hoping that F1 will use us as their first invitation event, because F1 comes to Miami in May.
So
F1 is Formula One, guys.
So didn't I see Cars last year or the year before? Or was it before
2 years
that?
ago, yeah.
2 years ago.
We didn't do it during COVID.
And so that's where the sports cars are all over there. Driving up and down the streets. I'm going, where's that going?
Yeah. It's and
on
then
Key Biscayne.
yeah, and then Emerson drives the Spirit of Miami. That's our logo car, which is now resides in Florida. And here's what I didn't know in the car collection industry. Emerson has driven a McLaren. He's driven a Penske. He's driven, and these F1 and Indy cars are owned by private owners. And what Emerson will do is, because he's won 2 championships, but to win 2 championships, you have to win other races for the points, et cetera, et cetera. So basically what happens is he calls the owners and says, this is my event. Do you mind sending my car? And guess what? They send the car. And so we get these really cool
It's sort of like ponies at the
yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's Grant Miller over there. He's motioning us.
He's wrapping us up.
He's holding up one finger, this finger right here.
Well, which means in the first one, you all didn't get to hear me say thank you to not just Michael, the publisher of the Miami Community News, sorry, Michael, and Grant Miller for the opportunity not just to have my tete-a-tete with Michael or Grant, depending on who's available, but also my own show. And this is what you see when you come to Miami Community News. And I think Lori Jennings talked about it. She talked about the gem of South Miami, because everybody has a smile on their face. This company is moving forward. When COVID hit, they started with the studios. Now you have how many studios? At least 3.
We have 3 studios.
3 studios.
Yes, and we're so pleased to do that and help provide a connection. We work with a lot of the chambers of commerce.
Right.
And we have private shows like yourself, parentsyourparents.com. People can find you there. Or
Miami Community News.
There we go. Hey, man, we're the perfect couple.
.com.
All right. I think we're about ready to wrap up. Grant, what do you say?
Have a great day.
Have a great day, Grant.
Thanks, guys.